Hi gorgeous, my name is Sabrina and welcome to my channel. Today we're covering the twisted love story, not romance, horror flick Obsession, and how it exposes the nice guys as predators. I watched Obsession last night and it completely altered my brain chemistry. I haven't had a movie completely alter my mind to make me feel viscerally ill or make me feel disturbed in such a long time. The last movie to ever make me do that was 2012's Sinister. Now, if you haven't watched Sinister, please don't. Please watch at your own discretion. But if you have, if you know, you know.
Ha! I caught your ass! No, you didn't. Oh, shit!
What made Obsession invoke such strong feelings out of me was its dedication and persistence to showcasing the true horrors of a victim. I internalized it as a lens of multiple victims: domestic violence victims, sexual assault victims, and people who struggle with mental illnesses. All three are taken advantage of and share something in common: vulnerability. Let's briefly recap. The movie leads with a skittish boy named Bear. Now, Bear has three best friends: Ian, Sarah, and Nikki, whom he has a huge crush on. Weekly, they go to play trivia night, and Ian loves trivia night. Like, this is the one thing that he looks forward to because literally his entire life is just working and working and working. Now, Bear's crush is so intense, he decides to tell Ian, hey, I'm gonna ask Nikki out. Much to his displeasure, Ian tells him no because trivia night is so important to him. Naturally, Bear can't resist. After a night out, Nikki decides that she wants to go home. So Bear naturally, he steps up and decides he's going to take her home. They both seemingly understand each other on a level that they can't with the other members of the group because they can talk to each other on a deep level. But of course, that's short-lived because when Bear drops her home, he starts acting weird and Nikki just outright asks him, hey, do you like me? And again, cowardly, he's unable to tell her that he likes her. So when Nikki leaves the car, he reaches into his bag and he grabs an occult item that he got from an occult shop called One Wish Willow. Now, One Wish Willow is just this box that the shopkeeper said that people get as a collectible. However, they said you can also use it, and people who have used it have came back to the shop to either return it or to complain about it. Bear opens it under the discretion that you only get one wish. He cracks the stick in half and he wishes that Nikki only loves him. Now, Bear doesn't think much about this decision. And as I just said, he just wished for, and I want to get the words right, he wishes that Nikki loves him more than anyone in the world. And almost instantly, the wish takes to fruition, casting a dark shadow over Nikki's frame. And she went from being a cool girl to freaky Nikki. I love the freaky Nikki tidbit because it's so funny how that's the first instance in the movie where we see Bear throw stones and hide his hands, because he actively knows that Nikki does not like to be called that. The whole friend group knows that she doesn't like to be called that. But he decided to take Ian's advice, who he spoke to earlier that day, about asking Nikki out, and he told him to forget all that sappy stuff and call her freaky Nikki because she would like that. Now, if you're big brain, you kind of think about that and you're just like, why would your best friend, who's also best friends with Nikki, tell you to do that? But we'll get to that later on. I definitely think that's when his selfishness and the crack in his nice guy behavior started to seep in for me, because he's presented as this very skittish and shy guy. He's one of the more timid friends in the friend group. But at the same time, I just kept wondering to myself as I was watching, when is he going to crack? And you're probably like, why? And I'll tell you why. Because Bear is a disgraceful predator that is disguised as a nice guy. Everything isn't his fault when it is. Such as his cat dying in the very beginning of the movie, he decides to idiotically put pills next to his cat's food bag and then comes home to see that the cat OD'd. Whose fault is that, Bear? Yours. And it's like he absolved himself of it and just cleaned up the mess and just carried on. So I'm team I hate Bear. Bear is bad and I don't care how anyone tries to spin it. Let's get into it. The predatory behavior. Now, Bear sexually assaulted Nikki multiple times. Predators are usually said to be people that you usually know. And in this instance, Nikki known Bear for a really long time, and I'm pretty sure she would have never thought that he would ever do this to her. And I feel like the movie hits it on the head in terms of that dynamic because we don't really see that too often in movies, especially horror movies. We don't really know a lot about Nikki. The only thing we know is that she has a father that she's very estranged from, and that she's gonna quit her music job in the next 2 weeks and she wants to pursue being a writer. But we know so much about Bear. We know that he had a cat. We know that he doesn't have any family. He inherited his apartment from his grandma. We know that, as I said, that he's a shy guy. We know that he's known all the friends for a pretty long time. And I feel like that is reflected when Nikki's talking to Bear in the car ride to her house. She tells Bear in the car that she wants to be a writer. Now, Bear is like, okay, well, what type of books do you want to write? And she says, well, I'm writing a love story. And Bear says, well, isn't that a romance? Nikki kind of just looks at him and she kind of just continues on with what she's saying. And she's like, well, you're the only person I've ever spoken to about this. He doesn't know Nikki as well as he think he does. And I also feel like it showcased that Bear doesn't know how to distinguish romance from sexual tension or just sexual relationships to just platonic friendships. I feel like Bear is troubled in his own sexuality and his sexual means. Because at the end of the day, the way that I read it is that love is love to him no matter what, no matter how it looks. He's willing to take it as long as it's given to him and as long as it serves him. Whereas Nikki, she kind of uses her writing as a means to look at life, to actually tell real stories, to actually tell the harsh nature of her life. Hence why I feel like he loved the possessed version of Nikki so much, because the possessed version was willing to reassure him something that he knew deep down she did not have for him, which was love. At least not the love that he was looking for, because Sarah even tells Ian like, hey, me and Nikki had a conversation and she views him more like a sibling than she does a romantic partner. But Sarah also has a huge crush on Bear. And it's pretty interesting to me because Bear has no interest in her because she's showing so much interest in him. And he says to Nikki jokingly, you know, she makes it so, pretty much insinuating, she makes it so obvious that she's into him, which I feel like is a part of the nice guy culture. You know, a lot of nice guys think that they're nice guys just because they don't do things that are inherently violent, or they don't come off aggressive or forceful. But it's subtle things like that where it's like someone's clearly interested in you, and I'm not saying he needs to date Sarah, but he kind of put her down for being so into him, and he's willing to go through extreme lengths to be with the girl that clearly doesn't want him. It's also just disturbing because people will try to side and find reason in why Bear was behaving the way that he was towards Nikki, but they won't shed even an ounce of empathy or grace towards Nikki, the person who is the victim in all of this. Like, Nikki is watching behind soulless eyes as Bear is having the time of his life with who he presumes is his Nikki, even though he knows deep down that's not his Nikki, considering the erratic behavior and the disconnect between the two of them, where clearly the entity hosting Nikki's body is trying so hard to mold itself into the person that he wants, the Nikki that he wants, but it's incapable because it's not human. And I feel like we see this when Bear, once again being a coward, when things start getting intense between him and the possessed Nikki, he calls the hotline behind the One Wish Willow, and the operator is pretty, you know, monotone, answering his questions as he goes, and he's just like, hey, listen, you're gonna either have to die or you're gonna have to just live this wish out. There's nothing else that we could do for you. So I felt that this was a really cool moment because in the theater, I kept anticipating like Nikki was going to show up and bust the window and grab him out for, you know, being on the phone. But no, it was completely the opposite. It was a lot of suspense and tension of what next. And I feel like this movie did that so well, just keeping you on edge, even in parts where you feel like something's going to happen and then it didn't. And this was the shocking part because the operator is like, hey, you should probably listen to this. Nikki wants you to hear this, essentially. And it's Nikki screaming bloody murder. It was so chilling to hear. And I wish the movie kind of delves more into like where Nikki actually is. Not that it's necessary, because, you know, you could always interpret it as like a hell or something equivalent to it. But she does this blood-curdling scream, and Bear, again, the coward, just hangs up because he can't handle it. And I truly believe Nikki made it very clear that she's not interested in him. All of this even took place when they were at trivia night, and Ian says to him, like, hey, oh, I guess you two are gonna run off to go do something like naughty. And she's like, ill, don't do that. And this all led me to believe that Bear just doesn't take rejection well, which is part of the nice guy operation. Nice guys do not like to be told no because they feel like they're deserving, given how nice they are and how much they do. They deserve to have a special privilege over everyone else. And we see that when Ian literally tells him, hey, trivia night is for me. It's for me to hang out with you guys. It's for me to relax. And Bear decided to do what he wanted to do anyway by insisting and keep trying to ask Nikki out and trying to get rid of the rest of the friends to ask her out. And that was like, at this point, we're probably at like the third, fourth realization that Bear is very selfish, that Bear is very immature, that Bear is going to do what he wants to do regardless. And not only was that instance with Ian, but it was also with Nikki later in the movie where she tells him, hey, please kill me because this entity that is pretending to be her is literally causing her to suffer as she is watching behind those soulless eyes, as I said. And of course, Bear took that as a moment to reflect on his own feelings. And he's just like, well, what's so bad about being with me? Everything. Everything is bad about being with you, Bear.
Shit, I'm on Parkway.
You see that black car coming around the corner?
Yeah, I see it.
Duck, bitch.
So that was the moment where I was really in the theater like, I know you lying. I know Bear is not out here acting like he is all that and then some. Like, he is disgusting. He is a vile human being and he deserves to die. It's like he convinces himself that anything that's not a no is a yes. And that is essentially why I believe he is the obsession, not Nikki. The film also highlights abuse in relationships. Given that, I definitely believe that Bear is a narcissist. We start to see how his narcissism is created over time. He starts out as this super kind, nice guy, the shy guy that he wants everyone to constantly feel bad for him. And then he evolves into this monster who is very self-serving, who is very malicious and malevolent. And we see that with how he mind controls Nikki. And I'm not talking about Nikki behind the eyes. I'm talking about the possessed version of Nikki. The possessed version of Nikki is doing everything that she can, it can, however you want to refer to it, is doing whatever she can to please Bear. And it's not good enough for Bear because every time that she tries, Bear is always reprimanding her, telling her, hey, this is not okay.
You're so beautiful and you are normal, but this isn't okay, Nikki.
And that's what makes me believe that Bear knew it wasn't Nikki, because Nikki's a human. She would know not to feed you cat in your sandwich. She would know not to stand in the living room all day peeing on herself, literally using the bathroom on herself until you came back. But all you could say was, hey, that's not okay. We can't do that. Like, you know, that's not her. And to keep playing it up like it's her just behaving weird. And that's a true narcissist, to know that you're doing things to someone and you want to acknowledge that you're doing those things to that person. And you're trying to play it off like she's the crazy one. No, you're crazy, Bear. I definitely believe the movie had great commentary on how abuse manifests in a victim, because I believe Nikki's possessed version was experiencing reactive abuse. Like, there was a lot of little fight backs that the possessed Nikki have, and I don't know if that was necessarily a flicker between real Nikki and the possession, or the actual possession noticing that he is essentially making her crazy. Now, if you're unfamiliar with reactive abuse, I got you. Reactive abuse is when people being abused by their partner defends themselves. And we see this happen with Nikki a lot because she's often lashing out, especially at the friends get together. Now, Ian decides to throw a party. He doesn't invite Bear, and he definitely does not want Nikki there. He loves Nikki and he keeps asking about her well-being, because prior to this, when things first kicked off, Bear decided to tell Ian, hey, Nikki's being weird. She literally had an outburst where she was coming on to me and then she pulled back and then she was coming on to me again. Before you know that him and Nikki kind of had relations, you kind of get like an older brother vibe from him, where he's just like, well, did you come on to her? And he's like, well, no. He's like, okay, because I was going to tell you that you're messed up. And I'm just like, hey, little do you know, he is in fact messed up, because he does take it there. Hence him sexually assaulting Nikki as the movie goes on. But he doesn't see it as sexual assault because he sees it as consensual, because the possessed version is willfully giving in despite there not being any conversation that is okay. But as we continue on, Ian throws the party and he says that he's worried about Nikki's well-being and he's not sure she should be there, given all that information that he got from Bear early on, and just her erratic behavior at work and just how she's been these past couple weeks, essentially. Now, at the get together, Nikki was put into a compromisable position, and I felt like I couldn't breathe in the theater because this was the first time she had been around a crowd of people since her and Bear had started dating. And they were all playing Jenga, like an adult version where there was like flirtatious or sexual things written on the Jenga pieces. Bear decides to sit next to Sarah because someone pulled a piece where he had to swap sides with someone else. Much to Nikki's displeasure, she is not happy about this and she makes quite a fuss about it. So much so that the game pretty much ends with her stabbing herself in the face multiple times in front of everyone. And of course, you think naturally Bear would get up and scream and do something, react. But no, he sits in his seat, nursing his beer, literally depressed. And all you can hear is Ian in the background calling him an a-hole. And he's like, get up, take her to the emergency room. You need to do something. And Bear is just sitting there. I think that says a lot about who Bear is. Because you made this wish. You relished in all of the benefits of this wish. But you won't take responsibility for the repercussions. Now, I also want to state that Ian also did not want either of them to come because of the optics. Everyone knows that Nikki's kind of going through something, and it looks weird that she ends up with Bear after he just expressed that he was very concerned about her. So, of course, Ian being messy, he's like, if you're gonna come, I want to know if you guys are healthy. And I definitely feel like it reflected that they are in fact not healthy. Now, again, Bear is always seen as the nice guy, and this is where the mask starts to slip off because now he's angry because now people are no longer seeing him as this innocent shine being anymore. So when they get to the house, instead of saying, oh my God, Nikki, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I wish that I had been there for you. He immediately blames her and says, why did you go and do that to yourself? Bear, what do you mean? Why did she do that to herself? She did that because of your behavior. Don't say, why did you do that, Nikki? Nikki didn't do anything that didn't feel provoked. I definitely want to put into perspective that Bear knows what he's doing. He knows that it'll get a reaction out of Nikki so that way he can hush her up and then he can cradle her and then he can say, oh my God, we can work on it. You just have to stop being like this. But nothing ever about how he should stop being like him. And I do believe that this was really gutsy on the director, and the actress was phenomenal as she cited out this very creepy poetry at the friends get together, where she's demonstrating through her words just the roller coaster of emotions that she's going through with Bear and how their relationship is now manifesting from just an innocent love to something very intense, to something very scary and something very malevolent, if you will. There's a scene where he's swallowing the pills, but then he's also trying to throw them back up because he's incapable of doing so. He literally spent the whole movie runtime knowing how to fix it, but insisted on doing it his way and trying to mold Nikki into the Nikki that he wants, but things just kept getting too weird. And when things get too weird, Bear gets really uncomfortable and then he runs. He's a notable runner, and then he kind of blames Nikki for why he's running and why his life is falling apart when he's the one as the operator of the whole thing. I feel like it also does a great job at showing the codependency in relationships, or abusive relationships for that matter, because Bear can't do anything without Nikki. And even when he tries, he's still thinking about Nikki. And when people question him about her well-being, he tells them, hey, no, she's okay. Stop. Nikki's fine. She's happy with me. Leave her alone. Even though he knows that she's not okay. And we also see this with the possessed version of Nikki, where she cracks the one wish Willow because he buys an extra one in hopes that someone could wish for this whole thing to be over with so he doesn't have to off himself. And she wishes for him to be as equally obsessed as her. Now, you could also argue that this is just a symptom of, the entity just wanting him to not pull away from her. But I also saw it again as, unfortunately, a lot of women who are in domestic violence situations, they do go back to their abuser a couple times before they can become free. So I kind of saw the connection between her and Bear, where it's like the possessed version knows that Bear doesn't treat her well. So that's why she has these lashing outs and she's very angry with him and she tries her best to be the best version of herself. But then she's like, okay, well, maybe we just need space. And she walks away from the door and she lets him have space as he's in the bathroom contemplating whether he should off himself or not. And then we hear the stick when Bear decides to take the pills and then try to make himself throw up. And before he can make himself throw up, he immediately gets up and now we learn that he's equally in love with her. So when they decide to, kiss each other and now they're just like, yay, we're happy, Bear dies. And the entity immediately starts bawling and sobbing and is just like, I can't live without you, Bear, and reaches for the gun and tries to off itself. But by that time, the real Nikki comes back to consciousness and she pushes Bear off. So I feel like that was amazing symbolism about how a lot of people view abuse as a one-sided thing where it's like, oh, okay, well, she could just leave. And it's like, it's not that easy because there was a cycle that was happening. Bear was fueling her. Bear was making her believe things that he couldn't even give to her. Bear was selfishly using her, making her feel like that was love, even though it wasn't. And I do want to highlight that Nikki, the possessed form, that's not even a woman, is experiencing what many women go through every single day with abusive men. They're put in situations where they're made out to be crazy and they can't do anything when that person is removed from them because they're so used to the abuse, they're so consumed by it that it's hard to separate their identity from their abuser. And to see Nikki, the actual Nikki, come back from it, it's like now she's left with all these trauma, as if you could also, I interpret it as she's picking up the pieces now. Now that that situation is over, now she has to figure out who she is again and how she can move on with her life now that this situation of abuse has taken place. I also want to talk about the symptom of the misogyny and the predatory behavior of Bear, Sarah. Now, Sarah is a character that's whimsical. She's kind of like the alternative cool girl that's seen as a little bit nerdy and a little too straightforward. I thought she was a cool character. However, she was insanely male-centered. I don't necessarily think that Sarah is a bad person, but I definitely think she's an enabler and she definitely falls under the guise of a pick-me. And many women don't realize that being a pick-me can get yourself killed. It can also get other women killed. And in this instance, she definitely got herself harmed in the process of her being a pick-me. Sarah didn't deserve to die, and I want to reiterate that. I don't believe she deserved to die. However, I definitely believe because she liked Bear, she was the only person committed to making him look like a saint. Possessed Nikki spared her at the party. She pulled out her chair roughly and without saying any words, took her place to let Bear kiss her because during the Jenga, Bear had pulled one and it said to kiss the person to your left. So Nikki said, oh, you ain't kissing my man. And so she took her place and decided to let him kiss her. And of course, like I said, I feel like Possessed Nikki spared her, told her to back off. But for some reason, Sarah still wanted Bear, even though Bear had no interest in her whatsoever. And it made me feel secondhand because every time she tried to subtly come on to him, it was definitely like he was stiff-arming her. And we saw this when she's like whining about how she can't get into a university because she did a sucky job in school, in high school. But there is no true intimacy there. And it isn't until later in the movie where she's like, hey, Bear, I got my envelope. I want to know if I got in. The two of them meet in a parking lot. Bear sneaks out from Nikki. Now, I just said earlier, it was tension to think that Nikki was going to bust the car window when Bear was on the phone with the operator. But she actually does bust the window and she gives Sarah a pretty gruesome death where she repeatedly slams her head into the steering wheel, disfiguring her, literally taking off the first couple layers of her face to where it's just blood and bone and just pus and everything that you can see under the face. And it almost reminded me of a Terrifier movie. And, take that for what you will. I just felt like this is where the misogyny seeps in because she got a more gruesome death than Ian. Ian only got a shot to the head. I definitely feel like she learned a valuable lesson, but she had a warning and she didn't take that warning. So it literally put her in harm's way where she was literally killed. And I am getting sick and tired of watching movies where women are killed brutally and then the man kind of just gets like a simple slash or a simple like beat over the head or something. Like, if we're gonna do these type of kills, they need to be balanced. They need to feel like they're actually trying to invoke emotions out of us from both of them. And in that same scene, before Ian gets shot in the head, we see that Sarah's body, which the entity was supposed to bury, is now in the dining room naked, face gone, naked in the chair. Don't know what the symbolism of that was or why that was there, but it just felt unnecessary. And this is what I mean by like women being dehumanized in horror movies and things just happening to them for shock value without actual genuine meaning and explanation for it. So, I mean, obviously, you could argue that the entity was jealous of Sarah because, maybe it felt like it was intimidated, like she was going to take her man. Maybe if Nikki didn't bust the window, he probably would have kissed Sarah because Sarah said, hey, we should probably kiss. He probably would have done it. We'll never know. But I still just didn't feel like there was a benefit to murdering her, especially in that way. I don't want to say that the movie didn't handle its female characters well, because I think that Nikki is very well written. For instance, I definitely feel like the dark cast over her possessed body when she stands into the shadows, I interpret it as, her being a sexual assault victim. I'm a victim myself. I feel like I could relate to that. It's her standing in her trauma. It's her standing in her darkness and having to deal with those feelings. And it also is representative of Bear having the inability of seeing her true self. It's him essentially seeing Nikki as a silhouette versus the actual Nikki. So essentially she doesn't feel like a person and she's trying so hard to be a person, and it almost feels like she's trying so hard to be a person again after experiencing such deep trauma. Now that I understand, that makes sense. And I feel like we see instances of Nikki, transforming from her hair to her face to just her attire. So by the end of the movie, her face is bloody. She's got bruises and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get beautiful again. I just can't wait for us to be happy. Like all of this makes sense and it all contributes to the story. But Sarah's storyline just didn't contribute well. I do like the commentary, because like I said, I interpret it as her just being male-centered and her willing to do what she wants to do to get the love that she feels like she deserves. But you could also just see it as like, maybe she just was at the wrong time, the wrong place, and she didn't think much of it. Maybe she genuinely was being manipulated by Bear, because that's what narcissists do. He was making her believe that Nikki was the problem. So there's a lot of ways that you can look at it. And, I don't want to completely blame Sarah because, like I said, you could also see it from a manipulation angle. But I definitely feel like, again, if Ian's like, hey, this ain't right, I definitely feel like she should have been on board that it's not right. And now for my final thoughts. I feel like the leading actress did a phenomenal job. The whole cast did amazing, but the lead actress really sold it that she was two people. The original Nikki was the cool girl. The possessed Nikki was, I don't want to say crazy because I don't think she was crazy, but she was not in her right state of mind. I love the wonky, awkward movements of when she would like start glitching out, when like Bear would trigger her too much. And I guess that was one of the things that I wish we saw more of in a way. Like I wish there was some explanation as to why she would behave that way. I also thought it was interesting how much of an influence that the cast and the director had from Get Out. I noticed it in the movie. I actually never watched a trailer. I just up and went to go see the movie because I saw people saying how amazing it was. And I immediately got Get Out vibes from like the dining room table when she was just like, no, no, no.
No. No, no, no.
What?
No, 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 don't do it!
And I was like, oh, that's Get Out. From the black lady being questioned about like her position in the house.
Oh, no. 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 No, 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 no.
It was just like that same polarizing moment. Obviously they have different effects because they talk about different things. Like, Get Out is about the possession of black bodies, whereas Obsession is about the possession of women's bodies. So they don't invoke the same emotion, but they have that same polarizing feel where it's just like eeriness, like, oh my God, this is creepy, this is weird. I know some people, as the leading actress had talked about, some people felt like it was stealing,
or like the no, like in Get Out, like where the no means different things, and there's a person inside of a person, really drew inspiration from that. And so love that people are picking up on that online now.
That clip, I think.
Yeah. So they're like, they stole this from Get Out. I was like, no, we were so inspired. Thank you for like getting the two together. So
debatable. I feel like it could be a mixture of both, because the no scene kind of felt like the original, which is Get Out. But at the same time, I could understand the draw from inspiration, because it's kind of no different when people just replicate the "here's Johnny," or, you know, sometimes they won't say it, they'll just chop the door and have the person look through. So there's definitely ways that you can pay homage without taking the scene. Me personally, I guess I'm still in between, but I could see why people would say that. Overall, I thought the movie was great. I would definitely recommend it. I personally wouldn't rewatch it again because of its heavy nature and themes, but it's so important to watch it if you're someone who is dealing with a lot in your life, because the movie can offer you just red flags and different perspectives on how abuse can manifest, especially given the themes that I talked about: domestic violence, sexual assault, and, you know, just people dealing with mental health issues. It's very important to spot these things to keep yourself safe. Obviously, I would definitely watch with discretion because it is very heavy. At certain points, I've seen a lot of people say that it kind of shook them, and even me, you know, someone, as I said, who's a victim myself, it definitely left me shaking a little bit at the end. But definitely overall a great movie. I appreciated the acting. I thought it was spot on. You would never know that the movie was made on such like a medium-ish budget. Like, the movie felt so high budget, and you could tell that it was so much was poured into it, and it never felt like a horror movie until it was in your face. I definitely don't feel like we have enough movies to challenge us and to handle topics, such heavy topics, with such consideration and care, and I feel like this movie does that very well. Overall, thank you for watching, gorgeous. I'm so happy to have had you here. I hope I get to see you again. If you liked today's video, please like and subscribe and comment. I will definitely comment back, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, gorgeous.